You are listening to Meet the Thriller Author, the podcast where I interview writers of mysteries, thrillers, and suspense books. I am your host, Alan Peterson, and this is episode number 122. In this episode of the podcast, we'll be meeting Jennifer Graeser Dornbush. She is a writer, speaker, and forensic specialist, creating a diverse range of stories that shed light onto the dark places of the human experience. She's the daughter of a coroner, so she grew up around death. She's also authored the top-selling nonfiction authoritative book, Forensic Speak, used not only by Hollywood showrunners and writers, but also crime investigators and law enforcement. Her latest novel, Hole in the Woods, is based on the true crime case of Shannon Siders and is available now. So we'll get to talk to Jennifer about all that and a lot more, so stay tuned. A reminder, before we get to the interview, please visit thrillingreads.com/rate to rate and review this podcast. Ratings and especially written reviews show that you like the podcast, and it will help others find the podcast and give it a listen. It's the best way to help me get the word out, especially on sites like Apple Podcast. But wherever you're listening to it, please take a moment to rate and review it. Go to thrillingreads.com/rate to do just that. All right, here's my interview with Jennifer Graeser Dornbush. Hi, everybody. This is Alan with Meet the Thriller Author. And on the podcast today, I'm interviewing Jennifer Graeser Dornbush. She's a writer, speaker, forensic specialist. She creates a diverse range of stories that shed light on the dark places of the human experience, my favorite type of novels. Jennifer, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks for having me.
So you have probably the coolest background that I've seen with you're a forensic specialist. Your dad was a medical examiner, so you literally for real grew up with dead bodies. How was all that like? And when did you realize that was being unique when you were growing up?
Yeah, no, I just thought everybody had, dead bodies at their house. That's how the world works. I didn't realize it, for a while, probably till I was 7 or 8, when you start to become a little more cognitively aware of what's going on. But yeah, my dad was the medical examiner for 3 counties in Michigan, and the office was in our home. So literally everything came home, and people came to the office. So you'd have, police detectives or morticians or family members from victims needing paperwork. And it was just, like any sort of medical examiner office, except it was in our house. Of course, the autopsies he did at the hospital, there was a morgue that he had to actually kind of struggle to get that set up. And the ladies auxiliary, because the hospital had a ladies auxiliary that would raise money for things that the hospital needed. And one year they raised money for coolers for the morgue to help my dad set up a morgue. Yeah, crazy. So that's how it's really done in small places. So the ladies are making baked goods to buy coolers for the dead bodies. So yeah, that was, I don't know. Yeah, I know when I was a teenager, it was I felt it was really weird and embarrassing, because it was before CSI made it really cool.
And were you interested in reading mysteries and thrillers when you were growing up, or did that come later, or have you always been interested in the genre?
Yes, I kind of read everything. So it wasn't I don't remember being drawn to one particular type of literature or anything, but I remember reading mysteries, not in abundance, but I remember liking that. And it's funny, I just, kind of like my tagline, I just always gravitated towards stories that maybe, how do you say, kind of got into the underbelly of humanity, whether that was mystery or whatever. And then, but there was hope. It didn't just leave you there, but you got in there to see the inner workings of kind of the darkness of humanity, but then you were lifted out. It's somehow. So I don't know. That's always interested me, sort of exploring, why are we evil? Why do we suffer? What? Because there is so much craziness in the world and suffering, and I think anybody struggles with that at some point. So that's kind of what I gravitated toward.
Yeah, that's what I wasn't familiar with
Yeah.
the Shannon Siders case. So when I was preparing for this interview, and your
Yeah.
book, Hole in the Woods, and we'll get into that. Is based on that case, and so I googled it, and holy man, that's terrifying. What happened to
Yes.
that poor girl?
Yeah.
How did that hit your radar, and when did you start thinking that maybe you could write a novel based on that?
Yeah. So Shannon and I are, well, if she were alive, we would be the same age. So I didn't really know her, even though I grew up in a very small community. We just didn't run in the same circles. We didn't go to the same high schools, but, but people involved. And when she was killed, of course, my father was called in to do the autopsy and to examine. So I know he went out to the scene and was involved in the case for many, many years, and spent many years trying to figure out. There were certain tool marks on her body that were left, and it was very unusual. So I know he spent a long time trying to figure that out. So I don't know, I've just been, with this case from the very beginning. And as a young girl, young woman, she was 18, I was 18. And when something like that happens to a peer of yours in this small community, which you've grown up thinking is safe, it really shakes you, and it shakes the community. So again, that's kind of one of these stories of like, how does darkness touch a community, and what does the community do? And then 25 years later, this cold case team comes in, and they're able to dig in and uncover things and start talking to people and actually get down to the bottom of what happened, and eventually make an arrest and put this case through trial. And now two killers are in prison for the rest of their life. So it's got a hopeful ending to it, which not all of them do. And so that's really when I always thought it would make an interesting story, just because there were so many. It's not just about the brutal death of this girl. It's about how it touched the community and how it rippled through the community for years, and how my sister says it kind of put a dark cloud over our community in certain ways. And it's more about that and the secrets that were kept and held and why, which that's what I find fascinating. So when the trial, what it was kind of like, okay, I need, like, stories need resolution, right? Like, we watch mystery stories, we read them because we get a resolution, we get justice. And this one didn't have justice for a long time. But then when they finally took it to trial, I was able to sit through the whole trial for 3 weeks. And then my writer brain started going, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, there's a resolution to this. There's a really hopeful, beautiful resolution to this. Now I have a story.
And is that the challenge too when you're writing a fictionalized story based on real life events? Did you find that challenging when you actually started prepping for it, or did you just kind of it like hit you and you're
Yeah.
ready to go?
No, it was challenging because there's so many puzzle pieces to this story, and you can't put everything in, so you do have to kind of cherry pick, because when you're creating a story, it has to make sense logically. Real life doesn't make sense. Real life is a mystery every day. Case in point, we're at election day. This is a big mystery day, but and we'll probably never understand today.
Yes.
Years from now, we'll be unraveling it.
Yes,
But
the whole downtown is getting boarded up right now. So yes, it's
oh gosh, I know. Where are you, Alan?
in San Francisco.
Oh God, yeah, in LA too. It's all getting boarded up. Oh, it's
Yeah.
just crazy. Exactly. But when you create a story, you get to have those logical points. So I had to figure out what were the logical points of her story, which again, I totally fictionalized, but the logical points of the actual case. But then when the actual story was resolved and discovered and delved into by 5 cold case detectives who worked on it for 2 years straight. Well, that's amazing. Great resources to have on a case. But when you're writing a story, you don't get to have 5 protagonists. So I had to figure out too, like, okay, who is the protagonist? Who are we following through this case? So that was a bit of a challenge too, to figure out what does she know? Who is she? why is this case important to her, you know.
And so your book is A Hole in the Woods, and it's out now. So listeners, go pick it up. Go pick up, copy up. What's that story about? Then I know it's based on Shannon's case, but can you tell us about about Hole in the Woods?
Yeah, sure. Quickly, I'll just say it is told in multiple points of view, kind of like Rashomon. So but the main point of view is our cold case detective Riley St. James, and she's, early 30s, really snappy young woman who's been working and living in Detroit her whole life. And she gets assigned to this case, which is in northern Michigan. And so she is pulled out of sort of her big city beat cop kind of life into this small town, which she never lived in small town. So she's this real fish out of water, and she has to uncover all of these secrets and figure out. It's not so much a whodunit. It's not structured that way, because you figure out, you learn pretty much in the first couple chapters who did it. It's not a big surprise who did it. It's more that they are a threat in the community, and now she has to figure out, well, how am I going to actually prove that they did it without getting myself killed in the process.
Yeah, I love those. Those are crime thrillers. Those are my favorite genre to read. So.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
And so I was fascinated to find out too that you worked with this Cold Case Foundation when you were releasing your book and everything. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that came about?
Yeah. So how it came about is I've been wanting for years to partner with a nonprofit organization who's working somehow in law enforcement or justice. And because I think it's great that we write these fictional characters and all that, but the real heroes are the people who are actually working in the field. And so I knew that eventually I wanted to find an organization that I could support financially or however. I knew for sure I wanted to, support them financially as a philanthropist, but I didn't know. I didn't know how else that would spring about. So I actually found them very randomly, and I started to research them. I'm like, wow, these people are exactly like have my heart for what they're doing. And so what I'm doing for them now is basically Hole in the Woods, the novel. I'm giving a portion of the sales of that book, a donation to their organization in perpetuity, as long as the book is out there and making money. So a novel with a cause. And then soon they are, as I started to partner with them, they have a real heart they help people who have been victimized by crime and the cases have gone cold. So you, as a family member or as a law enforcement, you can go to them and say, this is my case. We haven't been able to solve it. Can I get some other eyes on it? And they have a huge team of professionals who will, if they take on your case, they'll bring that case to their professionals, and those professionals will start to work on that case to offer another set of eyes or any resources that they can to help give it, to solve it, honestly. And it's all free. They're a nonprofit, and all of their services are free to law enforcement because there's such a lack of funding for supporting cold cases. And so that is really cool. I love that. The second thing that they are starting to develop, which I will be more a part of, is they do a lot of victimization training, which is basically how training people of all walks of life, young, middle, old, any profession, how to not become a victim of a violent crime, what to look for, what to be aware of. They have a very interesting way that they look at victimization. And so if we can start to look at ourselves that way and awareness of our surroundings, and they have a lot more to it than I'll go into here, but they're really, their goal is to start training communities in victim prevention. So I'm going to be helping them do that.
Yes, that's like a fantastic organization. And, I like to watch the true crime shows and like to read the fiction books, and you don't realize how many cases are unsolved. Actually, I was kind of shocked when I was looked into that. It's a lot of unsolved cases out there.
A lot of unsolved cases. Yeah.
So now, was Hole in the Woods? Is that was that your first book, or you've published other books?
Yes, I've published other books. I published a nonfiction book called Forensic Speak, which is a guide for writers. It also makes a great coffee table book, just if you're like a CSI fan. It's basically the Forensic Science Academy in a book. And then I have another series called The Coroner. It's The Coroner and Secret Remains. Those are the first two in the book. It's the Coroner's Daughter series. So those are more like traditional mystery novels. So I'm going to be expanding that series. So.
Cool. Yeah, I was checking out your website, and I saw you do a lot of speaking and training for writers. And I know there's a lot of writers that listen to this podcast, so I should definitely have to go check your stuff out. You have some pretty cool courses out there and stuff. How do you get into that field, and do you enjoy it? I'm assuming you enjoy it, but how'd that come about?
Yeah, I love it. Well, see, okay, before I actually started really taking my writing seriously, I was a teacher. And I taught middle school, I taught high school, I've taught college. I still teach college here and there. I'll pick up a course here and there and teach. So yeah, I've always been a teacher. And I don't know, when I wrote this Forensic Speak book, then people just started kind of asking like, hey, can you teach us about how do we make our forensics more authentic in our book and the way that we write? And so I don't know, it just kind of was a natural progression, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's great because especially nowadays with the readers, sometimes they know so much and they get so upset if you get things wrong. So it's good to have people like you, and there's others out there who help writers out to try to get a little bit more realistic in our writing.
Right, exactly. And then there's some things that because they've been we've seen them on TV so many times, we think they're true and they're really not true. And that actually doesn't happen, but you've been trained to think it does.
Yeah, isn't it what they call it, the CSI effect? Even in court cases, there's, I guess, the jurors are like, oh, well, why didn't you do this, and that, like this on a TV show?
Exactly. It's it doesn't quite work that way.
And what's your writing process like then? When when you get an idea and you start, do you plot them out a lot, or you just start to write them? What's your writing process like?
Yeah, I am a strong plotter, and that's because when I started writing, I actually trained in screenwriting. So I trained in screenwriting starting in 2002. And screenwriting is very structure heavy because I almost consider it's almost like poetry. Like you have to be so structured, but within that form, there's so much freedom as well. So I love being very structured. I really need to know where I'm going. I spend a lot of time mapping things out. And then once I have it all mapped out, it's almost like I can just relax. I'm like, oh, good, I know where I'm going. And then I just sit down and then I write. And of course, things change and morph and move around, but I like to know where I'm going, especially when you're writing mystery or thriller, because you have to have those logical points that get you, well, this happened and therefore that clue happened. And then that clue led to that and that. So,
are you doing both kind of writings at the same time? You're writing for screenplays and then the books at the same time, or do you tackle the different projects at a time, or?
I always have about four or five projects spinning, and some are screenplays and some are novels, and
that's so cool. I just watched a video on YouTube behind the scenes or behind the curtains. It's all about screenwriting though, and they had the writing room guys of Breaking Bad. Mm-hmm. And like you said, I was just in awe how everything is just like the whole thing is on cards and. Oh yeah. Oh man, that's cool.
Yeah, because especially when you're writing TV, you're mapping out 10 or probably 10 episodes, and so it's all each board is an episode, and you have to really know where you're going, because when what you're doing in episode 2, it might affect episode 8, and you can't go back and reshoot that. You have to. Production does frowns upon that. So.
And so, have you ever? So you say you wrote the true crime book. Do you enjoy writing about the nonfiction, or have you ever thought about writing like true crime stories because of your background?
I love true crime, and actually, spoiler or big announcement or whatever, I'm actually working on a project right now that's true crime and is nonfiction. It's a book that we're getting ready to pitch based on a very famous serial killer.
Oh,
That's all I
nice.
can say.
Oh, cool. Serial killers. Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm guilty of being fascinated with the serial killers as well. So even
We
back,
all are.
back in the old days before the internet, I had to actually check books out of the library. And I remember my girlfriend at the time was very worried, but she's my wife now. So it didn't figure out too bad, I guess.
She's stuck with you, yeah.
Yeah, she stuck with me when I saw the books I was checking out from the library. But it's just so fascinating. Like you said, it's just how can a human do that to other humans? It's
Yeah.
just kind of mind-boggling.
It's mind-boggling. And I think that's why we're fascinated, because those of us who aren't psychopaths are like, how does that mind work?
And so I like to ask my guests too on the writing tools. Do you like use like Word, or do you use a different software program to write a book than you do to the screenplays, or what are your tools?
Yeah. Okay. So I use a plain old fashioned notebook when I'm just like first coming up with ideas and kind of plotting structure. But yeah, then I just use Word. And then for screenwriting, when I'm finally ready to go to script, I go to Final Draft.
Oh yeah, that's a big
Pretty
fan.
simple. Yeah, it's pretty simple. Yeah. And I'm not really a note card person. I tried, and I don't know, it got too much. I was like,
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. And so I was kind of curious too. Now, has the pandemic changed your writing process at all? I mean, imagine since it's changed everyone's lives so much this year.
I would say 98% of it is the same. The 2% of it is I so miss going to coffee shops and writing. Oh, I miss it. I miss just going out just going to a coffee shop. I'm that classic. Yeah. I want writer in a coffee shop. There's certain, can be very conducive to writing. So I've really missed that, but otherwise my routine is pretty much the same. I was always writing from home. So I'm like, welcome to my world, everyone.
Yeah, that's what Kip said to everybody, like my wife now has to work from home, and I was like, well, this is what I've been doing. It's like, we've been self-isolating for a long time.
Exactly. I know. My husband's working from home too. And he's like, this is kind of weird. Like, I don't see people. I'm like, yeah, I know. It's great.
Yeah, isn't it nice? Yeah, so like everyone now has to become an introvert. Yeah, I feel bad for those super extrovert types there. It's a struggle, but for introverts, it's kind of like, well.
Yeah. I'd be curious when this is all over, like if there was any way to possibly study like how many extroverts got COVID versus how many introverts, like if
that'd be interesting to see. Yeah.
Like, did they actually push the limit and go out more? And like us introverts were like, no, I'm good. It's cool. Talk to you in 2021.
Yeah. This year didn't happen.
Yeah, it's all good.
So what are you working on next? Is The Hole in the Woods, is it a standalone? I know you said you have like a lot of plates in the air.
Yeah. No, it is. I've always kind of pictured it as a standalone. Okay. So more on the Coroner's series. I'm going to keep working on the Coroner's Daughter series. And then this true crime. I'm working on a short story for an anthology, which is called Murder and Music, based off of one of the Eagles albums. So they picked like 9 of us authors. So I'm doing one of those. And they're all like mystery authors. So, there's a lot of other stuff spinning, and we'll just see where it goes, just pitching and developing and see where it lands.
So any advice for aspiring writers that are listening to this podcast? I always like to close it out with that question.
I mean, I'm sure they've heard this a million times, but honestly, like, you really just have to do it. I mean, you just have to sit down and do it. If you want to write, I hear so many times people's like, oh, I want to write this book, or I have this idea for this book or this screenplay, whatever. And it's the simplest advice, but probably the hardest advice is just sit down and do it. Carve out time in your day or your week, whatever that looks like for you, and commit to it. And maybe just start with like a month commitment, or a 3-month commitment, whatever's comfortable for you. But really, that's the only way it happened. I ran from my calling for a good 12 years. Like, I knew I was supposed to be a writer. I knew I was supposed to be doing this. And I just found ways to do found excuses, not ways, but found excuses to do other things and other careers. And I pushed it aside for 12 years. And then when I sat down and was like, okay, I have to do, like, you're going to die someday, Jennifer. So are you going to do this or not? Like, are you going to be at your deathbed saying, I wish I would have, or are you going to give it a shot? And I'm like, well, I'm going to give it a shot. And then at that moment, so, well, how are you going to give it a shot? Okay, well, I have to rearrange my schedule a little. I have to do this to fit it in. So I'm going to try it. I'm going to try it for a year. And that's how it all happened. A year became 18 years.
I mean, it's simple advice, but people are always looking for that magic pill, and you just have to sit down and do it.
There's no magic. It's hard. And there's many days I don't want to do it. And
Yeah. So what's the best place for listeners to find you? I'm assuming it's at your website.
That's perfect. Yep. That's
JenniferDornbush.com.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really. I checked out your website. I highly recommend that. You have a lot of great information there for writers too. So if your writers are listening, go check that out. Some good stuff, and you do classes and everything. So hopefully in 2021 that starts getting back to normal a little bit. Hopefully.
Yeah, me too. I did some online this year. We'll see what happens next year. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Jennifer. And Hole in the Woods is out now. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Yes. Thank you, readers and writers. Well, thanks, Alan.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Meet the Thriller Author podcast. Be sure to visit thrillerauthors.com to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover great thrilling reads. If you enjoy the podcast, I'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review to it, wherever it is that you're listening to this podcast, be it iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, wherever it is that you're listening to this right now. I would appreciate it. And please do check out my own thriller novels over at my website at alanpeterson.com. Until next time.